Welcome back. The United States negotiating with the enemy. Now Americans held captive in Iran are coming home, but it's in exchange for 7 Iranian prisoners getting off scot-free. So who exactly are we letting go?
Fox News Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live in Washington, D.C. to break it all down. Catherine, what are your sources telling you?
Well, just to bring people up to date, according to the Washington Post, 3 of the 4 Americans have now flown out of Iran. And this is extremely important because it's part of a signature that we've seen all week, kind of a 1 step forward and then 2 steps back. One of my contacts on the Hill who had some clearance on the discussions told me that the original timeline was to try and announce the deal around Monday of last week, which would have brought it on the eve of the State of the Union, but the details kept sliding. They anticipated Friday and certainly did not hope that Saturday on a weekend would be the day that all of it would be announced. You ask an excellent question about the Iranian Americans who are part of this swap. There are 7, some of which have been convicted on federal charges of trying to break the sanctions. So technically it is correct that none of the Iranians were guilty of crimes of violence or terrorism, but I think you can make the argument that trying to evade the sanctions and support an illegal nuclear weapons program that's intended goal is violence against other nations, I think is an argument worth making. And the U.S. also agreed to waive international arrest warrants for 14 other Iranians. So even when you do the math, 21 versus, well, 3 at this point, it's a pretty striking arrangement.
So, Catherine, what about the other Americans left behind? I think a lot of people are aware of Bob Levinson, the former FBI agent who's still apparently being held, assuming he's still alive. But you're reporting there are at least 4 Americans left in Iran in captivity.
Well, that's right. That's right. A congressional contact of mine who's briefed on the intelligence, when I asked about the 2 publicly identified Americans, including Levinson, who remain, what they told me is that there were several other Americans whose names are not public who are still being held by Iran. And they use this as evidence to me as part of this argument that Iran really, truly has not turned the page on this idea of using foreign hostages as bargaining chips in the future. And I think that that data point is extremely important because there have been no promises made about whether they will be returned in the future.
Catherine, can you speak to the White House is maintaining that this had nothing to do with the nuclear deal, that this was totally separate, that there are other reports this morning that there in fact were discussions and this had very much to do with the nuclear deal. What are your sources telling you?
Well, I think you simply have to look at what the Secretary of State, John Kerry, to understand that that logic, I think, is faulty. Secretary of State John Kerry said in Vienna that there were 2 tracks. He said that they were not directly connected, but he did concede that once the deal was done last summer on the nuclear deal, that the discussions over the hostages intensified. Frankly, I think it would be naive to think that they are not connected. And the timing this week certainly has a feel of something that has been extremely stage managed and dealt with in a public relations matter, as a public relations matter.
And also, we can't forget earlier this week the 10 Navy sailors that were taken captive around Farsi Island, and then we saw that humiliating video of them on their knees with their hands behind their head and that awful apology. And many were saying this is showing that Iran is trying to show some strength over the United States. In this instance, with this swap, do we come off looking strong or weak?
Well, I mean, I'm a reporter, so I can't really give you an opinion on that. But I think if you simply look at the data, you had what we believe now are 3 Americans who are out. None of them were guilty of crimes. These were sort of chumped up charges that were brought by the Iranians. And we swapped them for individuals who were convicted in American courts of trying to evade international sanctions to help Iran build a covert nuclear weapons program, and 14 others that were wanted by Interpol. This is the International Police Organization. We've agreed to have those warrants waived. So when you simply do the math, it's clear here that Iran has come out ahead, and they still maintain, I'm sad to say, American citizens for whom we can probably expect more bargaining in the future.
That is a really interesting point. Thanks for bringing that to us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.